afternoon, Judge Belcher.
Good afternoon.
It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
So
You as well.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead and get comfortable, and when you are ready, you may begin your opening statement.
All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, Mrs. Roberts, members of the commission. It was with some initial hesitation that I find myself before you today. Not out of disbelief of my own qualifications, but out of the respect for the man for whose seat I seek to fill. Chief Justice Mark Cady cared about ensuring justice. He valued everyone, and he made no distinction in us as jurists. He also understood the importance of the judiciary in seeking the truth. I am heartened by my colleagues who encouraged me to apply because they could see that my like-minded temperament, character, and disposition would make me a most qualified successor. Now, while I do not believe any of the 12 candidates can fill Justice Cady's shoes, what I want you to do today, I want you to imagine the Iowa Supreme Court with me serving as a justice. My appointment would enhance the court by adding distinguishable life and legal experiences. The collaboration process is only as good as the variety and depth of perceptions that's brought to that decision-making process. Growing up in a small town, experiencing personal adversities, and having made Des Moines my home for the past 27 years, I bring a vantage point that is not shared by any other candidate and experiences that cannot be duplicated by any other candidate. I also bring a perspective that is necessary for the public to have confidence in a fair and impartial judiciary. I bring a viewpoint from 15 years as a prosecutor, litigating civil, criminal, and juvenile matters. I also have the ability to understand the needs of the rural communities, having presided within and outside of Polk County. Many of my experiences have allowed me to continue to be compassionate and empathetic in ensuring justice. As a Supreme Court justice, I bring 10 years of judicial experience, 10 years of writing decisive, persuasive, and concise rulings. Many of those rulings are regarding matters that appear before this court. Now, we must understand that before a matter reaches the Supreme Court, a significant amount of time passes. Those matters generate in the district court for which I preside. My appointment would bring someone who understands firsthand the who, what, why, and how, and someone who's able to decipher the historical origin of the matters, because on a daily basis, I see real people with real problems and real issues. On a daily basis, I listen to facts, I determine credibility, I weigh the evidence, I make findings, and then I draw conclusions. Most of my conclusions are made on the record at the close of a hearing. Now, my dependency cases, many of those end in termination of parental rights. In November alone, while managing 350 other cases, I wrote 14 termination rulings. Each of those rulings required me to go back to the point of origin, go back to when that child first appeared before the court, look at the different decision points, and draw a conclusion to enter a concise ruling. The appellate court has perhaps reviewed over 400 of my decisions over the course of 10 years. I can report to you that 99.5% of my rulings have been upheld. As a Supreme Court justice, I also bring the ability to collaborate well with others. And the example I wish to share with you comes from my family treatment court. My family treatment court deals with a lot of parents, but I want to give you one example of a child who was born drug affected. That child was removed from the parents at birth from the hospital. Those parents suffer, like many of the parents in my courtroom, suffer from substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental health issues. But the mother found strength to leave the abusive relationship after she joined my family treatment court and followed the recommendations of the team who used and worked in collaboration together, a team of providers who provided services, counsel for the child and counsel for the parent, and this court. We collaborated together to make sure the mother had access to the services necessary. About 14 months later, when the matter came before the court for the time that was set for a termination of parental rights proceeding, all of the parties were in agreement that this court could dismiss that petition. And that was a mother who had otherwise not ever parented her child. But she was in a place, and today she is sober, and she has that child in her care, and she and the child are both doing well. I am confident that I bring that same type of collegial collaboration to Iowa's highest court, collaboration regarding a change in interest as well as a collaboration in thought. I believe that my litigation background, my lived experiences, and my demonstrated judicial work ethic, temperament, and my ability to interpret the law and principal application of the law would make me an asset to the Iowa Supreme Court. I thank you for your service on this commission, for taking time during the busy holiday season to connect with me, and I remain humbled at this opportunity to appear before you. While certainly not filling Justice Cady's shoes, I do wish to walk in his indelible footprints, and I ask for your vote of confidence of my nomination to the Iowa Supreme Court. I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Judge Belcher, and we do have some questions today. We will begin with Mr. Spies.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Judge.
Good afternoon.
Judge, in addition to the adjudicative function of the Supreme Court, there are also lots of other supervisory and other initiatives that the court undertakes on a daily basis. One, of course, is access to justice. Are there other initiatives that the court has the power to implement that you would find something you could really sink your teeth into and drive the court or drive that initiative?
I think when you talk about the access of justice, it's a very broad area. It's very important that people, whether they be in the metropolitan area of Polk County or in the rural areas, know that they have the ability to access justice on the same level as someone who lives in a different area. Certainly being able to have counsel appointed when they cannot afford counsel, being able to have an interpreter present if English is not their first language. I also think it's necessary that we continue to get out into the communities so that people can see the court working and how the court works and how administration of justice is carried out on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Mr. Bloom.
Judge Belcher, we had a real good discussion. I asked every applicant about Article 1, Section 6, which sort of gets us into conversations about what equal protection means. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the way I remember it, we were sort of talking about there's some areas where I think a lot of Iowans see a lack of sort of common sense in where the law is at. And I was pretty open with you about what I think on a few of these things. And the way I remember it is, I think I was talking about rights of the unborn, and that even in a circumstance where a child is born addicted to drugs or alcohol, that you shared that there is no criminal charge to the parents that allowed or caused that to happen. And that stuck in my mind, and so I just wanted to bring that up today. If you could add a comment to that. Did I remember that correctly, first of all?
Yes, you did. And when we had that conversation, we talked about my judicial philosophy. And I said that I like to think that I don't have a judicial philosophy because as a judge, I take an oath. I take an oath to make decisions without my personal belief, my personal favor, or what I may find to be true. I have to determine the law and the decision based on the law that is before me. So when I talk about there's not currently a law whereby a parent who births a child that is a drug affected, until that law is made, as a justice and as a judge, I have to abide by the law that's currently present.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stanger.
No questions. Mr. Spies actually took my question.
Mr. Horbach.
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Mr. Goodman.
Judge Belcher, thank you for your application and your presentation today. Beyond Chief Justice Katie, are there other justices on the Supreme Court that, when you read the advance sheets, you are drawn to or think share a common judicial philosophy with you?
I can say I'm most familiar with Justice Christensen because of her involvement in district court. And I believe that her judicial philosophy, ensuring the access to justice, ensuring that we don't forget about children and families, and ensuring that we continue to make sure we have that equal access to all persons.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mrs. Sinclair?
Judge Belcher, you do such a good job on the district court. Would moving you to the Supreme Court be commensurate with the void that you would leave when you're no longer doing the good work on the district level?
That's a good question. I would hope that there would be someone who would follow me, who would be able to do the work on the district court bench. I believe my work and my experience on the district court bench has prepared me for the Supreme Court. And I would hope that the void that is created could be filled by someone who would share my same passion and my same outlook and compassion for people in ensuring justice.
Thank you. Mr. Bevel?
Thank you. Judge Belcher, today you referenced distinguishable life experiences. When we talk about diversity, sometimes we don't talk about those life experiences. How would that affect your impact at the Supreme Court?
When you look at collaboration, if there is no diverse of thought or interest or opinion or experience, because we all bring our experiences to the bench. So if there is no variety in terms of the way we think or experiences that we have, there's very little need for collaboration. So certainly my life experiences have shaped my perceptions that can be added to the collaboration process. And it's just a matter of adding a voice, adding a perspective that currently is not shared on the bench, which I believe helps to get to the truth. It doesn't change the truth, it doesn't change the process or the decision, but it adds to it.
Thank you.
Ms. Law?
No questions.
Mr. Gray?
I'd be remiss without telling everybody that you and I share a birthday.
Yes.
But I've had it first by a long ways. One of the things that the Supreme Court judges do is they do also oversee the legal profession. Can you tell me what you understand the role of the Supreme Court is in doing so?
I think the role of the Supreme Court is to make sure there are practice and procedures and rules that govern how attorneys should respond and act. And I think I bring a good viewpoint, having practiced both as an attorney and as a judge for the last 10 years, to understand not only how those rules are developed, but also understand what is the practical implication of those rules and how we try to, for lack of a better word, police ourselves and making sure that we are following the established rules and protocols that are necessary.
Thank you.
Ms. Pearson?
No question.
Ms. Conover?
Judge, there's been some discussion today and with some of the applicants in our private interviews about the fact that the current court doesn't have a lot of criminal background on it. And in looking through your application, you have a criminal background as a prosecutor, and I presume in your juvenile court role, you're dealing with criminal issues when we're talking about delinquencies and waiver hearings to decide whether somebody's going to district court instead of your staying in your court. But I noticed from your application that you also, when you were with the county attorney's office, had some background in civil work as well. So would you talk with us today a little bit about the diversity of your practice background and how that can enhance the current court?
As a civil prosecutor, I had an opportunity to preside over guardianships and conservatorships. I also served as counsel to the different department heads. Several of the things I did was to make sure one of the areas was marriage licensing. So at that time, I was advising that department regarding marriage licensings. I also had an opportunity to look at civil rights violations when you had individuals whose civil rights were violated. So I represented the state or Polk County in those areas as well.
Mr. Berger?
No questions.
Ms. O'Brien?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Sukup?
Thank you. Judge, you'll have served as a district associate judge for 10 years coming up this year, I believe.
In August.
In August. What are you doing differently now than when you started, or what's different on this past 10 years?
I've learned a lot, particularly as the presiding judge of the Family Treatment Court. And a lot of what I've learned deals with being trauma-informed. So how we address the public and the manner in which we try not to re-victimize people who come before the court.
Thank you.
Ms. Valentine?
Thank you. Judge Belcher, you talked a lot about differing life experiences, and I'm sure it's difficult to boil it down to one, but I'd like you to share one life experience that changed you, either for the better or worse, that you think would make an impact on the court.
One life experience was the loss of my little sister at the age of 20 with 2 children under the age of 2. She was murdered by her paramour. And that really struck my family in a way that we just had to rally around those 2 children to make sure they were loved and cared for and got what they needed. I think because of my overall background, I tend to be more compassionate because of what I've seen and what I've experienced. And that just allowed me to be even more compassionate for many of the people that come before the court.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Mr. Hoytink?
Day one, if you were to become a member of the Iowa Supreme Court, what do you think is your biggest strength, and what do you think is your biggest opportunity for improvement?
Day one, I would like to go around and meet my colleagues and start to establish a collegial relationship with them. I think that's going to be important on day one. And then just understanding all of the nuances and expectations of being a Supreme Court justice. I think my temperament and my demeanor and my character will allow me to not just blend in, but also to be someone who can try to bring us together, even though we perhaps have differing of opinions and differing of experiences that will weigh into the collaboration process.
Thank you.
Well, Your Honor, thank you for your service. Thank you for being here today, and we wish you well.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It would be my honor to serve as a justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.